Did you know that there's a real-life theory of an empire that was once the center of civilization until it mysteriously vanished from the entire world? This kingdom worshipped the sun god, and it was only discovered because a man traveled the world to search for real-life poneglyphs and decode the true history of our world. Now, doesn't this suspiciously sound exactly like One Piece? This empire or kingdom is known to be called Mu. Mu, just like Mu in One Piece? Well, yes actually, exact same spelling and everything. James Churchward, the man who decoded the ancient text and solved the existence of the lost continent of Mu, writes in his book that the continent can also be called that land of Kui. Churchward also explains how many different countries and cultures originated from Mu, and these cultures would include the Mexican natives, the North American natives, the ancient Egyptians, the Japanese, Greeks, the Pacific Islanders, and the Chinese. Now, the reason I bring this up is because when I looked up what Kui means in these languages, I was completely mind blown. In one of the Pacific Islands, Hawaii, Kui means to stick together, to sew together, or to weave together. This reminded me of the Straw Hat and also of how in One Piece we always hear the phrase to weave history. Now, if you think this is a stretch, then check out what Kui means in Chinese. In Chinese, Kui is the word for a legendary musician who invented dancing and music. Isn't this just like how Joy Boy is a musician since he has the drums of liberation? If you think that's a stretch, well, another thing Kui means is a drum, just like the drums of liberation. Another thing it means is a monkey with a human face. You literally can't make this stuff up. Now, according to Churchward, Kui's symbol is the sun or the word that can be read from the symbol of the sun. And when you put all these together, isn't this just like how in One Piece, the ancient kingdom is connected to a legendary musician who's a sun god, who has the drums of liberation, whose will was inherited by a monkey with a human face that will weave or sew history back together, and whose symbol is a straw hat that was weaved together. On top of this, one of the other names for this lost continent is Lemuria, and it was named after the lemurs, which is a very close primate to monkeys. There's even an ancient type of lemur that is now extinct called monkey lemurs. If somehow all of this still isn't enough, then another name for this lost continent is the Empire of the Sun. Now, if you think all of these things are crazy, well, this is just the beginning of the theory, and let me just say, there's a lot more to go over. I believe that this real-life theory on the lost continent of Mu solves the most important mysteries of One Piece, and I believe it tells us the exact name of the ancient kingdom, which, by the way, I don't think it necessarily has to be Mu or Kui, but instead is a Japanese word that translates to Mu, which Oda actually foreshadowed in his story. What's up guys, Wizard of Wars here today, and I read an entire book on this lost continent of Mu twice, just for this theory. The original time was actually pretty much just searching up some history, some ancient stuff that I like looking into on my own time, but the second time I read it, just for the theory, because I realized that I think the entire of the One Piece history, the entire of the ancient kingdom, is all based on this book, and pretty much like a real-life void century that this book pretty much talks about, and a real-life ancient kingdom that this book also talks about. And yeah, this real-life ancient kingdom has a sun god just like the sun god Nika, and I honestly think that this might be my best One Piece theory yet. It's probably at least my favorite theory. I don't know if it's my best, you guys will have to say at the end, but I do think it is my favorite, so I'm honestly just so excited to share this video with you guys. Now, while reading the book, I was literally just in awe and would scream out loud, "There's no way this is real. The Mu piece is real." Like, you guys should have seen how excited and just how insane I looked when telling Preach for the first time all these things that I found. Now, in this video, I'll be explaining pretty much all the connections to Mu in One Piece and to Mu into the ancient kingdom. And then lastly, how the word Mu is actually connected to a Japanese word that Oda may have foreshadowed of being the ancient kingdom's real name. Also, this is only part 1 to a huge void century mega theory, and there should be 3 parts in total. Preach will soon be posting part 2 to this theory, and sometime after that, I'll post the final part which decodes everything that happened during the void century. Everything on the next 2 parts is connected to this first video, so subscribe if you want to see the next 2 parts as well. Trust me, they're gonna be pretty crazy. And so now that I got all that out of the way, now let's take a look at why I even looked into this theory in the first place. Now, the original reason I even looked into Mu being the ancient kingdom was because I noticed a lot of similarities between the two after catching up to One Piece. I started reading a book on Mu before I caught up to One Piece, simply out of curiosity for real life mysteries, and once I caught up, I saw a Reddit post that led me to making this theory. I saw a Reddit theory that said the ancient kingdom symbol is a sphere with 8 points. The reasoning for this is because many of the countries associated with the ancient kingdom have this exact symbol. For example, Shandora has it, Wano has it, Fishman Island has it, Elbaf has it, and even Alabasta has it. In my opinion, Alabasta's is the most important to the theory since it proves that this symbol was connected to the ancient kingdom. Spoiler alert for anime only watchers, but in chapter 1085, King Cobra tells us what Queen Lily of Alabasta wrote in her letter to the future rulers, and she wrote, "Fly the flag that heralds the world's eventual dawn." Another translation seems to say, "Bear the flag of the dawn against the world." She's talking about this very flag of Alabasta, which proves that this symbol of the sun with 8 circles or 8 rays is connected to the ancient kingdom and to the dawn of the world. Now, the reason this is so important is because when I originally saw this Reddit post, I immediately thought of Mu, since that ancient kingdom had a very similar looking logo. First off is this sun with 8 lines coming out of it, and when Churchward explains this symbol, he says, "This is one of the symbols of Mu, the empire of the sun. A sun in mid-heaven surrounded with rays." Here's another page with a bunch of these symbols with a circle of 8 rays. The bottom right symbol looks very similar to the symbols used in One Piece. Also, when discussing all of the sun and cross symbols located in different parts of the world, Churchward writes that the wide scope of these symbols and their common meanings prove them to have been of common origin. Yucatan, Egyptian, and Hindu records prove that they all came from the land of Mu. This is just like how in One Piece, the wide scope of the symbol with 8 circles around a sun proves that they all have a common origin, the ancient kingdom. Now the next symbol is described as being the royal escutcheon of Mu, the empire of the sun, a sun with 8 rays. This proves that a sun with 8 rays is the very symbol of Mu, just like how it might be the very symbol of the ancient kingdom. Also guys, I figured this out after recording and editing the entire video, but yeah, in the book there's also another page where Churchward writes about, I believe her name is Princess Arwali, where he says she's holding a fan that has the symbol of Mu, or the royal escutcheon of Mu he calls it, and if you take a look at that symbol, it's also a sun with 8 rays, and yeah, I just wanted to say that this is another symbol too. This page discusses the topic even more, and it shows that this is what the royal escutcheon of Mu also look like. Notice how it's a sun with 8 rays and with a cross in the middle. This symbol really seems to be what Oda based One Piece's ancient kingdom symbol off of, since we literally see this exact symbol on the Moon City. Notice how in Enno's cover story we see a symbol that has a circle or sun with 8 rays coming out of it, surrounded by another circle, and in the midst of the sun is a small cross, which is exactly like the royal escutcheon of Mu. When describing this symbol, Churchward says that it reads, Mu, the empire of the sun. We also see him talk about this symbol on another page, and he also explains how the Greek cross originated from Mu. On another page he explains how and why the cross originated from Mu and what it represents. Now this is important because the symbol of the cross might also be proven to be connected to the ancient kingdom in One Piece. On one of the Elbaf boats, we first see a sun with 8 circles around it, which is the same symbol that many other countries have. We then see a sun with 8 rays, which is the exact symbol of Mu and almost identical to the sun on the moon. Lastly, we also see a cross, and it looks just like one of the crosses that Churchward talked about in his book. I believe that all 3 of these symbols being on the same boat is a hint from Oda that they're all connected, and that connection would be Mu. Remember, the people of Elbaf are known for having a winter solstice, which is a festival dedicated to the sun, just like how Mu was known as the Empire of the Sun. That's another big hint too actually. Mu was literally called the Empire of the Sun. Now, isn't this exactly like how the ancient kingdom was directly linked to the sun god? And maybe just like how Mu is the Empire of the Sun, maybe the ancient kingdom was the kingdom of the sun. And also, isn't the ancient kingdom also believed to be directly linked to the dawn, which is another term that has to do with the sun? I also believe that the ancient kingdom being based off of the Empire of the Sun may be directly linked to their technological abilities, since Vegapunk Lilith also talks about creating an actual sun, and the ancient kingdom may have literally had one and used its energy for the technology. I mean, Mu in the Chronicles of Akakor, a 10,000-year-old book, is described as using solar heat as an energy weapon. Well now, if that was enough to convince you, then check this out. So the 1963 Japanese film Achegon is about the continent of Mu being destroyed in a single night, and then survivors called Muins rebuild their great civilization. The Muins built an artificial sun and called it the Heart of Mu. Maybe just like how they built an artificial sun, maybe the ancient kingdom also did, or at the very least, Vegapunk will build one after learning the technology of the ancient kingdom. This whole Mu having insane technology perfectly goes along with what Vegapunk pretty much described the ancient kingdom to be. Shaka says there was once a kingdom just as highly advanced as Egghead that actually existed 900 years ago. He then says that in theory, long in the past, there used to be a futuristic city just like Egghead Island. He says that Clover gave his life for archaeology and brought that kingdom's existence to light, and that timeline matches up with the period in which a certain machine discovered elsewhere was originally produced. This means that the ancient kingdom was a futuristic kingdom that actually existed in the past, and that the only thing that rivals this technology is the current technology of Egghead. This reminds me of something else that Churchward wrote, which is, civilizations have been born and completed and then forgotten again and again. There's nothing new under the sun. What is, has been. All that we learn and discover has existed before. Our inventions and discoveries are but reinventions, rediscoveries. This quote perfectly parallels what Shaka said and what Vegapunk is currently doing. The ancient civilization of the ancient kingdom was forgotten, and then the discoveries that Vegapunk created are not inventions or discoveries, but instead reinventions and rediscoveries. One thing that proves this is one of Vegapunk's best technological creations, which is the Vega Force 1. Shaka tells Frankie that he built the Vega Force 1 by using the ancient giant robot as a guide. He then says that there's aspects of that robot that even he's unable to recreate, and that would be a dynamic power source. After this, he says that in the past, they had a power strong enough to rewrite everything we know about the world today. Now, this is important because it seems like everything Vegapunk is trying to accomplish has to do with that ancient power source. In the next chapter, we see the actual Vegapunk tell Luffy that his dream is to create a world in which energy is abundant, available, and free to everyone around the globe. He then explains that he wants to recreate a world with free and abundant energy because it eliminates war in the world. After this, he states that the harder I strive to find the energy that I've been seeking for, the closer I get to the power source that moved this machine shoulder, the ancient energy that gave it strength. So, as you can clearly see, Vegapunk's entire dream is to reinvent the ancient power source that the ancient kingdom used, and this perfectly goes along with Churchward's belief that our civilization's inventions are only reinventions of a past forgotten age. Churchward also says that there have only been two civilizations since man first appeared on Earth, the first and the present great civilizations. This is just like how in One Piece there's only two known great civilizations, the ancient great civilization and the present story one. Also, did you guys know that this dream of Vegapunk to have free and abundant energy is the same exact dream that Nikola Tesla wanted? Nikola Tesla tried creating a tower that would produce unlimited energy for free. He wanted to, just like Vegapunk, create a free energy source that could power up a death beam and end wars for eternity. His goal was to allow all countries to have this energy since it was free, which would then end all wars. Tesla wanted to do this because he had a deep hatred for war. This free energy was also thought to be naturally produced by the Earth, and this goes perfectly along with what Vegapunk says. He says, just reach out and feel. Energy is right here, and there, and all around us. The world is positively brimming with it. If we can simply convert it into a kind of power that you can see and use, we would be eliminating one of the greatest causes of war in the world. Now, although this already sounds identical to Tesla, there's even more connections which ties back to Moo. So Tesla tried creating his free energy by creating a tower known as the Tesla's Tower or Wardenclyffe Tower, and these towers were based on laws that he learned from studying the pyramids of Egypt. One of Tesla's beliefs was that the Egyptian pyramids were giant transmitters of energy, and that energy would be free energy. Later on, in 1998, Christopher Dunn found a ton of evidence that supposedly proves that the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually a machine that used hydrogen to produce electricity. So basically, according to this theory, Tesla was right about the ancient Egyptian pyramids being used for an energy source. And now, you may be wondering, well, why does the Egyptian pyramids being able to produce free energy matter when it comes to One Piece, and even more so to this theory of mine? Well, the reason it matters is because the pyramids of Egypt came from a very ancient civilization, and Churchward believes that Mu was the origin of the civilization of Egypt. Now, in his book, he says that he believes that the people of Mu were actually responsible for creating the pyramids of Egypt, and I think of a lot of other places as well, but Egypt is the most important one for this theory. Now, just like how Oda based Vegapunk off of Tesla, maybe he also based the technology of the ancient kingdom off of the theory of the technology of Mu. Now, the biggest evidence of Oda creating this highly advanced ancient kingdom, because he was inspired by the writings of Mu, is when describing the ancient records that he deciphered. Churchward writes, they tell of this strange country of 64 million inhabitants who, 50,000 years ago, had developed a civilization superior in many respects to our own. Isn't this just like how Vegapunk describes the ancient kingdom to be a civilization that was as highly advanced as the Egghead Island, arguably even superior since they attained a power source that not even Vegapunk has been able to recreate. On top of this, another source that I found on Mu says that they had built a great empire and a mighty science upon the continent which your legends called Mu or Lemuria. Another source says, when describing both Mu and Atlantis, that both continents were home to two races of gods, two civilizations more advanced than the current ones. They came into conflict, thus developing a war with aircraft and nuclear weapons. Doesn't this sound just like how there's races of gods in One Piece who ended up going to war, arguably a nuclear war with weapons similar to the Mother Flame and with the ancient weapons? To go even more into Mu's tech, according to Churchward, the people of Mu were capable of telepathy and teleportation. Now, if you put this into terms of science, doesn't Vegapunk literally want the entire world to have telepathy? The definition of telepathy is the supposed communication of thoughts or ideas by means other than the known senses, and Vegapunk wants people to communicate their ideas without using their senses since he wants their brainwaves to connect. Also, just like how Churchward believes that the people of Mu were able to teleport, isn't that another thing that Vegapunk has accomplished? I mean, since Vegapunk can do it, and since Vegapunk says that the ancient kingdom was as advanced as him, we could only assume that the ancient kingdom was also able to teleport and telepathically communicate, just like how Churchward believes that Mu could. Now, the next technology that I want to talk about that has to do with Mu is devil fruits. So it seems like devil fruits are most likely from the ancient kingdom and were created during the Void Century. Devil fruits also seem to be based on the biblical story of Adam and Eve, since in that story, the devil convinced them to eat the forbidden fruits. This story is supposed to take place in the Garden of Eden, which is where the fruits came from and where Adam and Eve were created. In One Piece, I find it really likely that the Garden of Eden exists, since we've already seen devil fruits, the Eve tree, and the Adam tree. Now, if One Piece's Garden of Eden is where devil fruits are created, just like how the Garden of Eden had the forbidden fruits, then wouldn't it make sense the ancient kingdom was the Garden of Eden? And now, to connect this back to Mu, Churchward believes that Mu is the real-life location of the Garden of Eden. In fact, his book even starts out by him writing, "The Garden of Eden was not in Asia, but on a now-sunken continent in the Pacific Ocean, or in other words, Mu." Throughout the entire book, he continuously brings up how Mu is the actual Garden of Eden, when he also says things like, "The land of Mu, the land of the West, that land of Kui, and the biblical Garden of Eden are one and the same." And if Oda based the ancient kingdom off of his book or off of this legend, then it would perfectly go along with it being the source of devil fruits. Churchward also brings up how the biblical story of creation as we know it today evolved from the original stories in the land of Mu. Now, isn't this just like how in One Piece, everything that seems to be based on biblical ideas has to do with the ancient kingdom? For example, the devil fruits, Adam tree, Eve tree, the Noah, Skypiea or heaven, the angelic races, the Lunarians or fallen angels all seem to be connected to the ancient kingdom. It also seems very likely that Nika is someone based on biblical ideas, since he has white wool hair and red eyes just like Jesus, comes back from the dead to save the world in Revelations, is the god of warrior of liberation, just like how Jesus is the god of freedom and liberty, and lastly, how Nika returned to defeat a beast, devil, and dragon. I mean, the sun god Nika's return was exactly like Jesus' return in the Bible. Jesus returned from the dead to defeat the devil, also called the beast and the dragon, and he defeated him by throwing him into the lake of fire, just like how Joy Boy returned from the dead, only to defeat a devil, since Kaido's an Oni, also called a beast or captain of the beast pirates, who's also a dragon. Joy Boy also punched Kaido into a magma pool, just like how Jesus threw the devil into the lake of fire. Now, to go back to Mu, Churchward says that Jesus' parables teaching style came from the land of Mu. He also says that the symbol of the cross originated from Mu. The symbol of the cross is very interesting since we also see Churchward talk about how the swastika evolved from the cross. Now, in the East, the swastika isn't considered to be an evil symbol like in the West, and the reason for this is because over there, it's a symbol for prosperity and good fortune. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the symbol also originates from the sun god Surya, and this yet again shows a connection between the sun god and Jesus. There might even be evidence of all of this in One Piece, since Whitebeard's flag used to have a swastika on it and was later changed to a Jesus cross instead of a normal Jolly Roger crossbones. Now, I know Oda changed it due to political reasons, but it's still kinda interesting that he changed it to specifically a Jesus cross. Now, another insane thing that has to do with Mu and gods is the fact that it seems like Oda based the sun god Nika off of the sun god Ra. The sun god Ra wears a sun disk, just like how Nika wears a straw hat. The sun god Ra rode on a sun boat, just like how Nika rides on the Sunny. The sun god Ra rose from Dawn and East, just like how Luffy came from Dawn Island in the East Blue. Ra has a secret name, and once learned, you gain his abilities, just like how the Gumma Gumma Nomi has a secret name, the Hito Hito Nomi model Nika, and once you learn its name, you might get its full powers since you understand that it's a Zoan. Ra is also the god of creation, just like how Nika's powers are his creativity. Also, just to point out the obvious, Ra is also a sun god, just like Nika. And so now that you see all the connections with the sun god Ra and the sun god Nika, now let's see what it has to do with Mu. So Churchward says, when elected to be the king of Mu, the hieratic head assumed the title of Ra, the sun, Ra being the king's symbol. To this title was added the name of the land of Mu, so that the king's full title was Ra Mu or Sun Mu. Then a new name was added to the land and it was called the Empire of the Sun. This perfectly parallels with how the sun god Nika was most likely a king back in his day, probably the king of the pirates. The ancient kingdom was most likely a kingdom connected to pirates and to the sun god Nika, especially after learning that Kuma's race of buccaneers passed down the legend of the sun god Nika. And since the buccaneers in One Piece are connected to the sun god Nika, we could only assume that the ancient kingdom was a kingdom of pirates. Now, on top of all of this, Churchward also writes that the sun was the symbol of the King of Kings. This is literally just like how the sun god is the king of the pirates, and how Nika is based on another king of kings, Jesus. Also remember that Kuma, the last of the Buccaneer race, who wanted to be like the sun god Nika, literally walks with a Bible 24/7. I don't find this to be a coincidence at all, since it seems that his Bible has Queen Lily on it, a sun behind her, possibly symboling the sun god or the empire of the sun, and wings that resemble the Skypeans. Also, Vegapunk says that Luffy looks just like a god that appears in the oldest of texts, and I feel like the text that he was referring to was the One Piece Bible. The reason for this is because Nika looks just like Jesus with the white hair and red eyes, and the Bible is like the main ancient text that we know exists in One Piece. I believe that the Bible of One Piece replaced Jesus with Nika, and that it holds the secrets to the Noah, Adam and Eve tree, devil fruits, and possibly even to Skypea. Alright, so another thing that I want to add into the video and tell you guys is the chapter, I believe it's 1098, came after I recorded and scripted everything, but the chapter actually did seem to confirm what I'm talking about right now. And the reason I know this is because we see in Kuma's church a cross, and then you can clearly see the 8 circles in like the middle of the cross, and I think that pretty much confirms that the cross is either connected to at least to the ancient kingdom, and probably that Nika is like the Jesus in One Piece, or like in the Bible of One Piece, like Nika is at least probably mentioned, I would say. So yeah, and another thing too in that chapter is that it seems to also be confirmed that that the Bible has something to do with Skypea, and the reason I think that is because when Bonnie brings up Skypea and when she says that she wants to go there, she says that she learned from it from a book, and if you take a look at the book, you can see the letters BL, and I think that's probably Kuma's Bible. So, and they're also in a church, and that's where Bonnie lives. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, but I think this all pretty much seems pretty close to being confirmed now, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. I also think that the One Piece Bible tells a flood story that occurred in the Void Century. However, I'll have to explain more on that in the part 3 of this theory, when I explain what I think happened during the Void Century and how I think the Ancient Kingdom disappeared. And so now that I showed you these symbols, technology, and gods of Mu that perfectly parallels the Ancient Kingdom, let's now take a look at what the Kingdom of Mu was described to be and how it parallels in One Piece. Okay, so another huge connection between Mu and the Ancient Kingdom is the fact that Mu is also tied to Greece, which is just like how in One Piece the Ancient Kingdom was most likely tied to Greek gods, Poseidon, Uranus, and Pluton. In the Mu book, Churchward says that a few references to the motherland of man are to be found among the writers of the old Greek philosophers. He then says that in Plato's Timaeus Critias, there's a reference to the lost continent when he says, the land of Mu had 10 peoples. Apparently another philosopher, Proclus, wrote, the lands of the West had 10 peoples. Churchward believes that these two sources are proof that the Greeks' forefathers were from Mu. More proof is apparently from the Greek alphabet. Churchward says that the entire Greek alphabet is composed of Karamaya vocables, which was the language of Mu, and that the translation of the Greek alphabet in the Karamaya language creates an epic that tells the story of Mu's sinking. After this, Churchward also says that the Greek cross originated from Mu, and that the cross and alphabet prove each other's accuracy. And so now that I showed you how Mu is connected to Greece, just like how the Ancient Kingdom is, now let's see what Churchward thinks Mu was like. So the continent of Mu was described to pretty much be a paradise of beautiful green land. One of the interesting things that Churchward describes it to be is when he says, roaming through the primeval forest were herds of mighty mastodons and elephants flapping their big ears to drive off insects. I wonder if the Ancient Kingdom of One Piece will have mighty mastodons and elephants roaming the land, or to simply put it, I bet you the Ancient Kingdom had Natami Narita elephants. The reason this line of mighty elephants being in the land of Mu stood out to me is because Churchward doesn't describe any other animals living in the land of Mu besides hummingbirds. This means that giant elephants were a common thing to Mu and were very connected to it. Another thing Churchward says about Mu is that, at the time narrated, the 64 million people were made up of 10 tribes or peoples, each distinct from the other, but all under one government. This is interesting because I think this also applies to the Ancient Kingdom of One Piece. The Ancient Kingdom's 10 peoples were most likely humans, the white-winged race, Lunarians, people who can live in the water like fishmen and merfolk, minks, the Oni race, giants, the three-eyed clan, Tontadas, and then the Buccaneers. I believe that all 10 of these distinct races once flourished together and lived amongst each other peacefully, just like how they did in the story of Mu. It's also interesting that Helena Blavatsky says that the Muans were a race with psychic abilities and a third eye, and it seems like in One Piece this also exists, since the three-eyed clan is supposed to have psychic abilities of having the voice of all things, which allows them to hear the poneglyphs. This makes me think that the three-eyed tribe are very connected to the Ancient Kingdom. Now, going back to the Mu book, Churchward then writes that all follow the same religion, a worship of the deity through symbols. All believed in the the immortality of the soul, which soul eventually returned to the great source whence it came. Isn't this just like how in One Piece, all of these cultures connected to the ancient kingdom seem to worship the same deity in the sun god? I mean, Churchward then writes that Ra the sun was used as the collective symbol for all of his attributes. Also, going back to what Churchward said about all believing in the immortality of the soul, isn't this just like how in One Piece, the people of the ancient times believed in the immortality of their will or passing their will onto the next generation? This would also explain why they created the Will of D in the first place, and it would also explain why Oda showed us that in his story, a man only dies when he's forgotten. The ancient kingdom leaving their poneglyphs and history to read for future generations allows them to live on forever and to never be forgotten. Now, after this, Churchward also says, these ancient inhabitants of Mu were great navigators and sailors who took their ships over the world from the eastern to the western oceans and from the northern to the southern seas. They were also learned architects, building great temples and palaces of stone. They carved and set up great monoliths as monuments. Alright, so there's a lot to take out of that part. First off, the people of Mu being great navigators and sailors who took their ships from the east to the west and to the north and south seas sounds exactly like pirates in One Piece. It especially sounds like something the Buccaneer race would do, which is a tribe that was wiped out from the earth and that holds a tradition of the sun god Nika. This also sounds like Churchward is describing the East Blue, West Blue, North Blue, and South Blue when he describes the seas as this instead of Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic oceans. If you interpreted this entire thing to One Piece, it would mean that the ancient kingdom had great navigators and sailors who traveled all over the world and throughout all the seas. On top of this, when describing these sailors and ships, Churchward later writes, on cool evenings might be seen pleasure ships filled with gorgeously dressed, jewel-bedecked men and women. The long sweeps with which these ships were supplied have a musical rhythm to the song and laughter of the happy passengers. Now, isn't this description of Mu exactly like what everyone thinks the ancient kingdom was like? Pleasure ships with jewel-bedecked men and women sounds like rich pirates with treasure. We know the ancient kingdom most likely had jewelry since an entire city of gold was their ally. The boats having a musical rhythm to the song and laughter of the happy passengers literally sounds like how in One Piece, the ancient kingdom most likely sang Bing Sake. I mean, what if the song parallels this description by making people so happy and making people laugh? Like, Bing Sake literally has Brooks laugh as its lyrics. Now, going back to the first quote on the inhabitants of Mu being great navigators, let's also look at how Churchward wrote. They were also learned architects, building great temples and palaces of stone. They carved and set up great monoliths as monuments. Now, doesn't this quote perfectly parallel with how the people of the ancient kingdom created poneglyphs? If we take a look at the definition of monolith, it means a single great stone, often in the form of a monument or column. Now, isn't this exactly what the poneglyphs are? Aren't the poneglyphs single great stones in the form of a monument or site that is of historical importance? Knowing that the Kazui clan were the ones who created the poneglyphs, we pretty much know that the ancient kingdom is responsible for the poneglyphs, since the Kazui clan might have been a part of them or at least tied to them since they hold their sun symbol. Now, on top of this, the ancient kingdom also seems to be parallel with Churchward's description of the people of Mu being great architects and building great temples and palaces of stone. I believe that the architects of the ancient kingdom are responsible for building great palaces like the Gold Temple and Bell of Shandora, Ryugu Palace of Fishman Island, the great buildings of the ancient kingdom, and the Old Wano. They honestly might have even built even more great buildings, but this is all we pretty much know as of right now. On top of this, there's even more of a connection with the things the ancient kingdom build and with the things the people of Mu build when Churchward says they all have a superstitious dread of going near any of the great ruins. When talking about the inhabitants of the Pacific Islands, he then writes, they believe the ruins to be haunted by ghosts and evil spirits, which they call Mali, so that it is next to impossible to get any of them to guide you to the ruins or even tell where they are. Isn't this just like how many of the inhabitants of islands in One Piece want to stay away from the poneglyphs because they think they're creepy? Another comparison would be when Churchward says Cortez asked the natives when he invaded Yucatan who built the old ruins, and they responded, the Toltecs. Toltec is the word for builder, so their answer was the builders. Bishop Landa, one of Cortez's men, writes that the word Toltec does not mean a race, but a builder, and who the builders were, well, no one knew, including the natives. Isn't this just like how no one knows who the builders of the poneglyphs were except for the Kazui clan and the Minks? The ancient kingdom and the Void Century remain a mystery to the world, which is why almost no one has been able to figure out why the poneglyphs were built and who built them. Something else that I found interesting in the Mu book is that apparently the people of Mu had bronze statues, and if you've been a follower of my theories for a while, you already know that I believe there's a bronze statue of Joy Boy on Laugh-Tale. Check out one of these videos if you're interested. Now, another thing with Mu is that apparently the symbol for Ke, or the deer, is the symbol for the first man. This reminded me of how Chopper, a deer, ate the human fruit. Something else that connects the continent of Mu and One Piece is when Churchward writes, another connection with the Quisha Mayas and the far distant past is their prominent symbol, the bearded serpent Quetzalcoatl, found principally in the Pajadito Park region. This is important because maybe just like how Quetzalcoatl connects the Mayans with the land of Mu, maybe Quetzalcoatl connects the Shandeans with the ancient kingdom. I really think this is likely since in One Piece, we clearly see that the Shandeans had the same exact Quetzalcoatl stones that the Mayans had. Now, this isn't the only thing with the Mexican natives, since in the book of Mu it said that Mayax was one of Mu's colonial empires. Isn't this just like how Shandora was one of the ancient kingdom's colonial empires? On top of this, on this page, we even see an important figure that was written in the history monolith at Tiwanaku of someone named Queen Mu. Throughout this part of the book, he explains a bit on Queen Mu, and I wonder if Oda based Nakrowa Mu off of this Mu. I mean, just like how Queen Mu was connected to the Maya in the real world, Emu or Mu might be connected to the people based on the Maya, the Shandeans. This might even be possible since Enel has a random golden face on his boat, which many people theorize to be Emu. I saw this theory on Reddit that this face is supposed to be Emu, and it definitely makes a lot of sense. First off, Emu and Enel have a bunch of parallels with their god complex. Enel and Emu both attempting to destroy the entire island, Luffy being Enel and Emu's natural enemy, and Enel killing people for speaking the truth about him, and so on. Knowing these parallels, I wonder if Oda put a face of Emu on Enel's ship to confirm the parallels, or to show that Enel is the representation of Emu. On this same boat, we also see two symbols that look exactly like the world government symbol, and who most likely founded the world government? Well, Emu. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we haven't actually seen this golden face once, but actually up to 3 times in the story. One of them was even on one of the Bibles, and I already explained how the Bible is most likely connected to the Void Century. If the Bible is a key to the Void Century, then this person's face is also probably connected to it, and then it would make sense if it were Emu. Also, we know that the Eve tree is perfectly lined up with Marijoa, so it seems like the Celestial Dragon's past might be within the Bible of One Piece. Another thing is that the Celestial Dragons call themselves saints, which is a biblical term for one who is holy or divine. There's even a very known man in the Bible called Saint Peter, just like how there's a Gorsei called Saint Peter. Even more proof that the Bible in One Piece has something to do with the Celestial Dragon's true history is something that I brought up earlier, which is the fact that on Kuma's Bible, we see someone who looks exactly like Vivi's mom, which means it was most likely Queen Lily, who's also connected to the Void Century and to Emu. Now, the way this all connects with the Shandeans having a connection with Nakrowa Mu, just like how the real-life Mayans had a connection with Queen Mu, is the fact that in Nolan's flashback, one of the Shandeans' pieces of gold had this same exact face. If this is in fact Emu, this may actually prove that the Shandeans actually did have a history with him or her, whatever you think Emu is. Now, going back to the Tiwanaku monolith that talked about Mu, another thing is that apparently back then, many archaeologists said, if it could only be deciphered in red, what a wonderful tale it might possibly tell about the ancient past. Churchward believes he did decipher it, and he confirms that this stone does tell a wonderful tale, taking its readers back to the days when Mu still existed. Isn't this exactly like how the Laugh Tale and how the Poneglyphs tells a story of a wonderful tale of the ancient past of the ancient kingdom? And now for the last connections with the Mayans and Shandeans is that Churchward says that the Mayans were connected to the Japanese, just like how the Shandeans are connected to the people of Wano. In an archaeological site in Mexico, Churchward describes many ancient artifacts that were found in a buried city. When describing one of them, he says, the most wonderful and striking of these is the terracotta figure shown on this page, figure 3. It has the form of a man in a sitting posture, his legs are crossed Japanese fashion, and the hands on the knees. Churchward wonders how a Japanese artifact was found in a Mexican buried city. On this same page, he also shows an artifact that looks like an Egyptian head, and this is just like how Alabasta is also tied to Shandora and Wano. Churchward later describes how the Karamaya language is so similar to the Japanese language that a Mexican Indian and a Japanese can talk intelligibly without the aid of an interpreter, since so many words are common in both languages. In fact, people today have noticed that Japanese and the ancient Maya language are basically identical grammatically. Now, another connection between these two cultures would be the worship of ancestors. Churchward writes, the worship of ancestors, or an ancestor worship, is so universally acknowledged to be of common origin that I think it necessary to prove it here. He then explains how the Japanese have a festival for their ancestors on July 15th, which seems to be the Obon festival in eastern Japan. This holiday remembers and honors deceased loved ones and family members. And now, isn't this Japanese festival almost identical to the Fire Festival in One Piece? I mean, the Fire Festival is a festival to mourn the dead, or in other words, a festival for ancestor worship. Also, Churchward believes that this Japanese festival originated from the traditions of Mu, and I believe it's the same for the Fire Festival. I believe the Fire Festival tradition originated from the ancient kingdom's traditions, and the reason for that would be because of its name and because of the god of the festival. The god of fire in Wano is a man who looks like Gear 4 Luffy, and Hyogoro also tells Luffy that he became the god of fire when he turned into Gear 4. This means that the god of fire of Wano was most likely Joy Boy, since you would need the Gama Gama no Mi to go into Gear 4. Also, the Fire Festival being named after the god of fire also makes me believe that it's a tradition that has to do with Joy Boy Boy and the Ancient Kingdom. Now, the real Japanese festival called the Obon Festival, which is what the Fire Festival seems to be based on, is almost identical to the Mexicans' Day of the Dead, where they also remember and honor their family members. And of course, in One Piece, we see that the people based on the Mexicans don't necessarily hold a festival for the dead. However, they do worship the dead, just like how the real Mexicans do. We see Kalgara say that the Shandians respect their ancestors as they would gods. We also see that the Shandians worship the white holy trees because they believe that their ancestors dwell in them. I believe that just like how the people of Wano, the Shandians also got these traditions from the Void Century or from the Ancient Kingdom. And something that may prove this is the fact that they ring the golden bell so their ancestors' souls can find their way back to the land. And of course, the golden bell seems to be directly tied to the Ancient Kingdom since there's literally a poneglyph in it. And another thing that might prove that ancestral worship originated from the Ancient Kingdom, just like how Churchwood believes it originated from Mu, would be the existence of the Will of D. The Will of D is the embodiment of ancestral worship since they all carry on their D clan's will from the times of the Void Century. Someone from the D clan always carries on another D clan's will, whether if it's Luffy being the embodiment of Roger and Joy Boy, or Blackbeard being just like Rocks. We even see Whitebeard, a man who knows the One Piece, say that just as there are some who inherited Roger's will, someone will eventually do the same for Ace. You can severe bloodlines, but their flames will never be extinguished. It has been passed down like that since ancient times. He's literally saying that you can extinguish the Roger family or extinguish a race from history, but someone will always carry on their will. The D-Clan naturally worships their ancient ancestors without even realizing it, and they always end up causing a storm and going directly against the gods of the world. This also all goes back to the theme of a man doesn't die until he's forgotten. And so now that I explained pretty much everything on how the Ancient Kingdom is based on Mu, now let me explain to you what I think the name of the Ancient Kingdom actually is and how it would have foreshadowed it, and also how it perfectly ties back to Mu. Seriously, check this out, guys. So I think that the actual name of the Ancient Kingdom wasn't actually Mu, land of Kui or Lemuria, but instead was Nakrowa. Now, the reason for this is because in chapter 643's cover page, we see Oda shows the existence of a legendary island called Nakrowa. Now, in case you didn't know, the name Nakrowa literally means dreamland, and it's also known as the Island of Dreams. Now, if we add in everything that I explained on Mu, combined with Nakrowa, somehow literally everything connects. So in chapter 1085, we see Imu talk about itself in the third person as Mu, and TCB told us what Mu in Japanese can translate to, which is void and also dream. So if Mu in Japanese can be translated as dream, then the Ancient Kingdom being called Dreamland would be even more proof that the Ancient Kingdom is based on Mu, and it would pretty much just be more evidence to everything. We even see the real Mu being called a dreamland when Churchwood writes, Mu, the motherland of man, with all her proud cities, her temples and palaces, her arts, sciences and learning, was now a dream of the past. And now to show you even more proof from Oda, from the very page of where we learn Nakrowa, notice how there's literally a monkey wearing a straw hat. Is this just like how a monkey with a straw hat is carrying on the will of the Ancient Kingdom, and how he'll be the one to either bring its existence back to the world, or at least bring back its ideals? Now, the craziest thing about this is that there's a lot more foreshadowing of Nakrowa being the Ancient Kingdom than just this. For example, back in Skypiea, we see Enel talk about a place called Endless Vert, or Fairy Vert in another translation. Oda later showed us that Enel thought the Endless Vert was the moon. However, I believe that Enel was completely wrong, and that it's actually the Ancient Kingdom. Here's why. So first of all, Enel says that he learned of this legendary place from his hometown, and that the people said that it's where God lives. This makes me think that it's a place where the sun god used to live. Enel then says that it's a place that has a limitless amount of earth, or in another translation, it's a land that stretches out further than the eye can see. Now, this is the main reason I know the Endless Vert isn't the moon, since the moon has no earth or soil. I mean, the very name of the Endless Vert proves that this place resided on the earth and not the moon, since to the Skypians, Vert is the word that refers to greenery and soil. So basically, how could the moon be the Endless Vert if there's literally no greenery or soil on it? Plus, when we take a look at the land that Enel is describing, you can clearly see that it's a green land. I also noticed that it has a sunlight dawning at the horizon. This makes me think that whatever the Endless Vert was, it was connected to the sun god and to the dawn of the world. Also, knowing that the Ancient Kingdom was an immense or enormous kingdom, we could also assume that it could be the Endless Vert that Enel was talking about, since the Endless Vert also seem to have been enormous and to stretch further than the eye can see. And if this is true, then it all comes back to Nakrowa, since the Endless Vert is also called a dream world or a world of dreams, just like how Nakrowa translates to dreamland or island of dreams. Now, another little hint from the Skypiea arc that may prove that the Ancient Kingdom was called Dreamland is that Cricket was the one who originally told Luffy what romance means. He tells him that the mere fantasy of not knowing for sure that the City of Gold or Sky Island exists or not makes the idea of finding it romantic. Now, this perfectly parallels the Ancient Kingdom, since we see that when Vegapunk tells these Straw Hats the theory of the Ancient Kingdom, Frankie calls it a tale packed with romance. Now, knowing that Cricket already searched for a romantic fantasy island in the City of Gold, wouldn't it only make sense that the next island that he searches for is a mysterious, romantic fantasy island? And if that's the case, wouldn't it make perfect sense that he's looking for the Ancient Kingdom, since the Ancient Kingdom was described with the words romance and mystery? And remember, Cricket and his monkey friends are the ones searching for Nakrowa, and in the cover page we even see Oda put they're on a quest of romance for the legendary island of Nakrowa. By the way, I know the spelling for Nakrowa is a bit different here, but it's literally the same word in Japanese, it's just whoever translated this one spelled it a bit differently. But anyways, this may be a huge hint to Nakrowa being the key to the Romance Dawn. Another little parallel with this may be the fact that just like how both the City of Gold and the Ancient Kingdom are described as being romantic, the City of Gold is also described as being a dream. When Nolan first sees the City of Gold, he says, it's like a dream. Right after this, we see Kalgara say that Shandora was destroyed 400 years ago in a fight to protect the Poneglyph. This proves that Shandora was connected to the Ancient Kingdom, and I believe that the things the Ancient Kingdom created were connected to things that would seem like a dream. Skypiea is another island that seems to be connected to the Ancient Kingdom and to the Void Century, and it's also described as being a dream. In chapter 835, Whole Cake Island is also called a land of dreams, and I believe that Whole Cake is somewhat a parallel with the Ancient Kingdom, since it's a place where all the races of the world live, and a place where you can eat as much as you want. I believe that the Ancient Kingdom was also a place where all the races of the world live peacefully. Also, knowing how Luffy wants to create a world where his friends can eat as much food as they want, I'd assume that the original Joy Boy wanted the same kind of world, which ended up being the Ancient Kingdom. In fact, I believe that it may be called Nakrowa or Dreamland because it goes along with Joy Boy's dream. I also believe it's called that because it was a place where everyone's dreams could come true. For example, if someone wanted to become a man made out of fire, then they could. I mean, Vegapunk specifically tells us that devil fruits, which most likely came from the Ancient Kingdom, were created out of people's dreams for these abilities to exist. He says, every devil fruit is a possibility for human evolution that someone desired. If only I could be like this. If only I could be like that. He later says, those with powers exist in different dimensions dreamed up by someone else before them. These lines prove that devil fruits were created because people dreamed of their powers, and I believe that Dreamland is a fitting name for a kingdom that could accomplish anything. I also want to add in that I think it being called Dreamland is the reason the world government didn't want anyone to even know of its existence. If people knew of a land that could make your dreams come true, who wouldn't want that? Especially when you consider that Marijoa and the Celestial Dragons crushed people's dreams by enslavement. In fact, Imu, who's the king of Marijoa, seems to be the exact opposite of the Ancient Kingdom, and I believe that Oda may have chose to call him Mu to show that he's the direct opposite of the kingdom based on Mu. Mu or Imu is the void, while Mu the kingdom is the dream. Mu the king rules over the world, while Mu the kingdom rules no one and allows freedom. Mu the king rules in secrecy, while Mu the kingdom was known to the entire world. Mu the king wants the Void Century to be a secret, while Mu the kingdom wants it to be known in history. The Sun God is the direct enemy of Mu the king, while Mu the kingdom revolves around the Sun God and his ways of life. Mu the void is the exact opposite of Mu the dream, since dreams are infinite. Now, although I don't necessarily know exactly why Imu called himself Mu, I just can't wait to see more of him because I bet the Void Century holds the secret to that answer. I wonder if Imu once belonged to the Ancient Kingdom and possibly even betrayed them. Also, have you ever noticed that Imu parallels Moria with their Devil Fruit powers? Imu and Moria both have shadow or black arrow powers that are used to impale through someone. Now, the reason I bring this up is because what Moria did to everyone on Thriller Bark is described as being a bad dream or a nightmare. This perfectly parallels how what Imu is doing to the world is a bad dream or a nightmare instead of a good dream, which is what the Ancient Kingdom and Joy Boy provide. Even more parallels with Imu and Moria would be that Imu has a giant freezer just like Moria. When Imu walks through the freezer, he carries Luffy's bounty poster, just like how when Moria walks through his freezer, he carries Luffy's shadow. At the end of each freezer is a giant straw hat and then oars, and this is pretty much why I believe there's a huge connection with Joy Boy and with an ancient Oni. Check out this mega theory right here if you're interested.